Let me start off with Haiti. A lot has been discussed here, but here's the one thing I don't understand. Haiti obviously is a challenge, number one, because of the suffering of the Haitian people by both natural and man-made disasters. It is destabilizing to its neighbor that it shares the island of Hispaniola with, the Dominican Republic. We have seen if one is facing the challenges that the Haitian citizens are facing, fleeing the island is clearly maybe a desirable alternative. That means migration in the Hemisphere and to the United States. So these are real tangible challenges we are facing right now. I've heard your answers about our overall goal of a Haitian-led democratic process. I share that. But when Doctors Without Borders are closing up because they can't get fuel to operate their circumstances, when I'm getting calls from orphanages that Americans sponsor who want to close up the orphanages and bring the children to the United States because they can't secure them, when people are sequestered and kidnapped, it seems to me that none of that can happen in terms of our aspirations for Haiti unless there is security. So what is our initiative to try to create some semblance of security so that all these other things can happen?
Thank you, Senator. That's a great question. As I mentioned before, it's a complicated issue. We, INL, are working very closely with the Haitian National Police, the new Director General. We are going to send advisors. When I was there 2 weeks ago, I arrived with, they had asked for greater ability to get police around the city. I showed up with 19 new vehicles, 200 new protective vests for the police. The 19 was the first installment of a total of 60 that we are going to deliver to the Haitian National Police. We're going to get advisors down there to work with the new SWAT team to start taking back the areas that have been taken from ordinary Haitians. But it's going to be a process, and it's going to take some time.
Well, first of all, is the Haitian National Police actually an institution capable of delivering the type of security that Haitians deserve?
We believe it is. It's an institution that we have worked with in the past. There was a small, brief moment where Haitians actually acknowledged that the Haitian National Police had gotten better and was more professional. Our goal, our long-term goal, is to try to bring it back to that.
So how much time before we get security on the ground?
I can't say exactly, but we are working as fast as we can.
Months, years?
I would hope we could do it in less than months, but we're working as fast as we can.
Well, here's the problem. I don't understand why there is a reticence to, for example, seek UN action to try to create stability. Because nothing else, when the gangs control the ports and everything you try to get to the Haitian people are stopped at the ports because the gangs control it, something is wrong. How do you do all the things we want to do to help the Haitian people if at the end of the day you can't get through the gangs?
Well, we're absolutely going to need, as you rightly point out, we are absolutely going to need the help of international organizations. We were a little bit stymied in this just recently when we tried to extend the mandate of the current group of police advisors. We wanted to get them extended for a year, but we were blocked by Russia and China. And they were only able to be extended for 9 months. But it's going to take a collective effort.
Yeah. And why do you think Russia and China stopped us? Because they want total unrest in the hemisphere. That's their whole purpose in this hemisphere, is creating instability, is to move people to a point of saying democracy doesn't work, let me try something else, authoritarianism.
Absolutely.
And they systematically work at it. At some point, we have to think about how we circumvent that. Let me turn to something else. Secretary Nichols, in the Trafficking in Persons report that the State Department put out, Cuban doctors were listed as among a group of people who were trafficked. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, when an entity like PAHO, the Pan American Health Organization, uses Cuban doctors in a way that allows them to be trafficked, shouldn't we be doing something to change that at PAHO?
We've had strong conversations with the leadership of PAHO about the unacceptable nature of that relationship. We've talked about the importance of better governance and oversight within that organization, and that in order for us to work with PAHO, we need to be assured that something like that can never be repeated.
Well, they'll continue, though. For example, right now, Cuban doctors are being used inside of Mexico in a way in which they are being trafficked. How is it, I understand that trafficking in persons by a country ultimately is a violation of the USMCA.
So we talked to all countries about the reality of the Cuban medical missions program, and that it's a massive trafficking risk, and we encourage countries to avoid it. It is it's an abuse of the Cuban people, and it's a misguided attempt to provide health care.
But when a country engages in it, knowing that, then there has to be some type of consequence. I mean, for those who might be viewing, understand what we're talking about. Cuba sends doctors to different countries in the world. They ultimately, those countries pay the Cuban government for the service of those doctors. Those doctors get a fraction of their wages, and their passports are taken away so they can't leave. That's human trafficking. And it's being done right here in our hemisphere with international organizations like PAHO, and done with countries who supposedly we have a relationship with, like Mexico. And there has to be consequences to it, or else we are complicit in the trafficking. Let me ask you, with reference to Nicaragua and El Salvador, Secretary Nichols, we can agree that in case of Nicaragua, we have a new dictatorship arising, and in the case of El Salvador, we have dramatic backsliding in democracy. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
So both of them are part of DR-CAFTA. Should we be considering suspending them as a action that is a strong action to be taken so that we can hopefully turn the tide?
I think we should be thinking about all the tools that we have available to us. There is an urgency to demonstrate to countries in the region that actions have consequences. The ability of countries to flaunt their own constitutions, their own laws, to abuse their own citizens is a huge problem, and we should use every tool available to...
Well, I think that part of the tools, one of the strongest tools you can do is take away trade preferences. When we entered DR-CAFTA, it wasn't with countries that were moving in the opposite direction from democracy. They were moving towards democracy. They were moving towards a respect for human rights. They were moving towards a respect for the rule of law. They should not be able to benefit from trade preferences when they go in the opposite direction. That's a strong action the administration can take, and I recommend it to them. Let me ask Secretary Robinson, while the United States has traditionally stood with principled activists and public officials that seek to reverse democratic backsliding, combat kleptocracy, and uphold the rule of law, those courageous individuals often face significant threats as a result of their work. Far too often, these individuals are forced to flee their countries when the situation becomes untenable or when they finish their term in office. Now, I know you're familiar with these dynamics. What more does the United States need to do to support those individuals who stand against efforts to undermine democratic governance? How can we address the challenge, for example, in Central American countries where the problem is particularly acute?
Thank you, Senator. That is a really important question. And I would say, we need to look at a basket of ways that we can support and defend democracy in Central America and, frankly, throughout the region. We need to continue to use all of our sanctions authorities and vigorously use our sanctions authorities. We need to continue to work with those governments to shore up their democratic institutions, independent attorneys general, judiciaries, the courts, prosecutors. We need to continue to work very closely with these organizations. We need to find more flexible and creative ways to support civil society and independent media in country, so that they don't. It's not easy to make them flee when they stand up and do the right thing for democracy, for investigating corrupt acts. I look forward to working with you all on finding these flexible and creative ways to do that. But I would say the last thing we need to do is we need to be more vigorous on protecting and offering a safe haven for those who do have to flee. It's a cumbersome process now. It's very hard there are at least four courageous people from Guatemala that are being hosted here. There are probably others from the region. It was hard to get them here. And again, I look forward to working with you all to figure out better ways, more efficient ways that we can offer some semblance of safety.
Well, we would certainly want to work with you on that and other issues. Let me just say, though, when the corruption fighter has to leave the country, there's one less person to try to create change.
Absolutely.
And so at the end of the day, we have to find ways to strengthen their hand, to create international spotlights on what they're doing, to make it more difficult for regimes to threaten them and ultimately cause them to leave. Because for them, for the regime, that's ultimately a success story, right? This person leaves, now there's one less person to try to create change in the country.
Senator, I would also add that we saw the model that worked. I can't remember who mentioned it, but I think it was Senator Merkley mentioned MOTSI in Honduras. We had international organizations in some of these countries that were working, and the reason they're not there now is because they touched people in those countries in power who had never been touched before. And I think if we can look at that again, we might have some more success.
Finally, Secretary Nichols, where did the idea for delisting the FARC come from?
It's been something under discussion since at least the previous administration. It was always contemplated as part of the peace accord. You may recall that when the Uribe administration reached an agreement with the AUC paramilitaries, that organization was also delisted.
Yeah, but more recently, who drove the question of delisting the FARC?
Well, it's...
Was it NSC? Was it State Department? Who was it?
I believe that this was it was when I arrived in the position that was already well advanced, so I can't say who the specific driver was. It was always a component of our support for the peace process and updating the threats that we face.
Well, my understanding is that what you're doing is sanctioning those who have not put their arms down and delisting those that have and are following a peaceful path to integration in their society. But this is an example of when I've pressed the question, both in nominations and with the administration, about consultation versus notification. And in this particular case, my notification was to the Wall Street Journal. That is not what I consider consultation. And the lack of getting that type of consultation creates problems. So I hope we don't relive it again. This hearing record will remain open to the close of business tomorrow. Members who have questions will submit it by then. We would like your answers to be expeditious and as full as possible. And with that, and the thanks of the committee, this hearing is